every city there is a place that everyone knows about, but few people dare to talk. In this city, it was an old railway station, dilapidated, covered with dust and moss. Decades ago, the last train ran there, which never arrived at the final stop. His disappearance has become a mystery, and the station is abandoned, cursed, as the locals say. But Mark, a young photographer and lover of urban legends, believed that all these were nothing more than silly fairy tales. He decided to go there one evening to film the evidence for his blog. No one expected that this night would change his life forever. Mark arrived at the station at exactly midnight. The place looked like time had stopped here. The rusty tracks, the leaning lanterns, and the thick fog that enveloped everything around created an atmosphere that chilled to the bone. He turned on the flashlight and took a few steps along the platform. Everything seemed normal. Trash, old posters, mildewed walls. But then he heard a sound. At first it was quiet, almost imperceptible, as if someone was tapping on the rails somewhere in the distance. The train must be somewhere far away, he muttered to himself, although he knew that trains had not been running here for a long time. The knocking grew louder. Mark looked at his watch. 12:13. The flashlight began to flicker. He felt the cold seep into his skin. Then he noticed it. Lights were moving on the rails in the distance. Two bright lights, like eyes, were approaching the station. The sound was getting louder. Now it was not just knocks, a grinding, screeching of metal, as if the train was bursting into this reality from another, gloomy and cold one. Mark froze. The locomotive, covered with rust and dirt, stopped in front of him. But the strangest thing is the carriages. They looked brand new, as if they had just been taken out of the factory. The doors opened with a frightening silence, and a voice, hoarse, cold, sounded from inside. "Sit down." Mark took a trembling step back, but something like an invisible hand pushed him forward. He ended up inside the carriage. The doors slammed shut. The tone becomes more ominous. The carriage was empty. The floor was covered with a red carpet, and dim lamps hung on the walls, illuminating the space with a soft but disturbing light. Mark walked slowly along the row of empty seats. It seemed that time had frozen in the carriage. He sat down in one of the seats, trying to figure out what was going on. The photographer took out his phone to take a picture, but the screen showed strange interference. And then, the phone just turned off. Suddenly, the train jerked. Mark looked out the window, but there was only darkness. No rails, no stations, just endless darkness. Suddenly, there was a whisper behind him, barely audible at first, then louder and louder. "You shouldn't have sat down." He turned around abruptly, but the carriage was empty. The whispers did not stop, turning into many voices talking at the same time. Voices were calling his name. Mark got up and went to the door leading to the next car. But the further he went, the more he felt that the space around him was changing. He saw people in the next carriage. They sat motionless, with dead, empty eyes. Their clothes were strange, as if from different eras. As Mark came closer, one of them turned his head and said, "You're next." He rushed back, but the doors wouldn't open anymore. Suddenly, the whole carriage was plunged into darkness, and he heard heavy footsteps. Someone was walking towards him. It wasn't a man. A huge silhouette with a distorted, elongated head was moving towards him. Mark felt a cold sweat on his skin as the steps became faster. The voice sounds fast, tense. Mark rushed to the end of the car, broke down the door, and ended up in the next one. But now it wasn't a carriage. It was a strange, cold room in which all the walls were covered with mirrors. In each mirror, he saw not his own reflection, but distorted figures watching him. "Why are you here?" A voice came from the darkness. He tried to scream, but the sound wouldn't come out of his throat. The figures began to climb out of the mirrors. Now they were all around him, whispering, touching his shoulders. "You've become one of us," one of them said, holding out his hand. Mark felt his body go cold. His strength was leaving him, but suddenly he remembered the camera. He picked it up and began to take it off. The camera flash lit up the room, and the figures disappeared. But it wasn't for long. The train stopped. Mark heard a whistle. It was a new station. He went out onto the platform, but there were no lights or people there, just a thick fog. Behind him, the train disappeared. He was alone now. Mark has returned home. It seemed like it was all just a dream, but watching the footage on his camera, he saw himself. You probably think this story's over, but the real nightmare began much later. The station, the train, and Mark himself have become part of something more than just a scary legend. People who dared to approach the cursed platform began to see things that previously seemed impossible. And one day, a new entry appeared on Mark's blog, which was considered abandoned for a long time. It did not contain any text, only a link to the video. No one knows who posted it, but those who watched this video soon began to see a strange reflection in their mirrors and hear the distant train horn in the silence. The voice becomes insistent, anxious. Anna, a young girl from the same city, heard the legend of the stamp in the train. Her friends laughed, calling her a coward, and once argued with her. If she walked the old ways before midnight, they would give her the prize she had won, the rare camera she dreamed of. That night, Anna took a flashlight, watch and phone with her to record her journey. She didn't believe in ghosts or legends, but deep inside she had a strange feeling, as if someone was watching her even before she stepped onto the tracks. Footsteps echoed in the silence of the night. The forest around her was eerily quiet, and the fog was sinking lower and lower, obscuring the trees. But when Anna reached the old station, she realized that she was not alone. There was a man standing on the platform. He was wearing an old-fashioned coat. His face was hidden by a hood. "Are you waiting for the train?" she asked nervously. He didn't answer. He just nodded his head toward the tracks. "Okay, I'll just walk by," Anna said, trying not to look at the strange stranger. But as she took a step further, a horn sounded behind her. She turned around and saw him. That's the train. The two lights were coming closer, like eyes bursting out of the darkness. Anna froze, but the figure behind her suddenly disappeared. When the train stopped, the doors opened. Now she realized that it was her choice to sit down or leave. But something about that moment made her take a step forward. The voice becomes harsh, tense. Anna found herself in the carriage. The light was dim, and the chairs were covered with dust. She noticed a mirror in the corner, large and ancient. It seemed clean, untouched by time. Anna looked into it, and her heart stopped. In the reflection, she saw not herself, but a carriage full of people. They were sitting there, dead with empty eyes. But when she turned back, the carriage was empty. She moved forward, jumping from one carriage to another. Each one was stranger than the last. One of them was completely covered with water, as if Anna was walking on the bottom of a pond. The other was an endless corridor with doors behind which whispers could be heard. "It's impossible," she whispered. Then the train stopped abruptly. Anna lost her balance and fell. When she got up, a figure stood in front of her. It was Mark. "You shouldn't have come here," he said. His voice was low, as if he wasn't speaking for her, but for himself. "What's going on here? Why are you here?" she screamed. "We don't choose this place. It chooses us. You're one of us now." Before Anna could reply, the door opened. There was a new station in front of her. It was her city, but it was strange, gloomy, as if it had been abandoned decades ago. There were people on the platforms, only their faces were pale like those of the dead. They were looking right at her. The voice grows, reaching maximum tension. Anna ran away, but her feet seemed to be stuck in the air. Suddenly, she noticed a little girl standing on the edge of the platform. "You shouldn't have come," the girl said, her voice echoing through the station. Anna recoiled in horror. The girl pointed to the mirrors that appeared around the platform. "Look who you really are." Anna looked in the nearest mirror and saw herself in a train carriage. She was one of the dead figures she had seen earlier. Her eyes were empty. At that moment, the train pulled up next to her again. The doors opened and the passengers got out of the carriage. They surrounded her, whispering the same word. "Stay!" Anna screamed, tried to run away, but her body was shackled. She felt the train pulling her inside. At the last moment, she snatched out her phone and pressed record. The voice becomes calm but anxious. The next day, Anna's phone was found on the tracks near the station. There was one entry on it. Her friends who were watching the video saw Anna in the train carriage. She was looking straight at the camera. Her eyes were empty, and her lips were repeating the words, "You're next."